They said she was a disgrace. A pregnant orphan, thrown out by her own stepmother and forced to marry a man who had nothing. The neighbors laughed, the town whispered, and everyone believed her life was over. But what they didn't know was that the man they called a beggar carried a secret powerful enough to rewrite her fate and humble every soul that mocked her. The rain poured endlessly over Nsukka, turning red earth into rivers of mud. 18-year-old Amaka Obi stood under the zinc roof of St. Matthew's Church, clutching a nylon bag that held everything she owned. Her stepmother's words still echoed like thunder in her ears. "Pack your things and go, Amaka. You've brought shame to my name." Just weeks earlier, Amaka's life had been simple: morning devotions, the sound of her father's laughter, and her job helping at a small pharmacy near the market. But after her father's sudden death, everything changed. Mrs. Adaku Obi, his second wife, had become the queen of the house, her makeup flawless, her tone sharp, her heart colder than marble. When Amaka discovered she was pregnant, she went to Adaku in tears, begging for understanding. Instead, she received a slap so hard her ears rang. "Who is the father? That useless mechanic? You have ruined yourself." Amaka tried to speak, but Adaku's rage only grew. "You think this house will harbor a prostitute? Not under my roof." The next morning, Amaka found her clothes thrown outside, drenched by the rain. The neighbors watched in silence. Some pitied her, others whispered. "That's what happens when girls don't listen," one woman muttered. "A shame to her family," another said. No one offered her a place to stay. In Nsukka, gossip spreads faster than harmattan fire. 4 days, Amaka wandered between shops and church compounds, sleeping on benches, hiding her belly under an oversized sweater. She thought about her late mother, a woman she barely remembered, and wondered if hardship ran in their bloodline. At night, she whispered to the tiny life growing inside her. "My child, I don't know how we'll survive, but I won't let the world break us." But Adaku had not finished with her. The woman wanted to erase every trace of Amaka from her late husband's estate. One hot afternoon, Adaku called Amaka back to the house. Her voice was sweet, too sweet. "Amaka, I've found someone willing to marry you," she said, smiling thinly. Amaka blinked in disbelief. "Marry me? Who would?" "A good man," Adaku interrupted, "kind enough to take you and your unborn child." "You should thank me." There was something sharp beneath her words, something poisonous. Later that night, as Amaka slept in the servants' quarters, she overheard Adaku's voice through the window. Yes, he's poor, a nobody. A man who sleeps near the lorry park. But once she's gone, the estate is mine. Let him take her and disappear." Amaka covered her mouth to keep from crying out. Her stepmother was selling her, not out of love, but out of convenience. 3 days later, a rusty Peugeot stopped outside the gate. Out stepped a tall man wearing faded jeans and a torn shirt. His name was Amaka. He looked older than Amaka expected, maybe late 20s. His beard was rough, his eyes calm and steady. He carried a small bag and a kind of quiet humility that made him seem out of place beside Adaku's polished cruelty. "This is the man," Adaku said proudly, as if showing off a purchase. "He's willing to marry you today." Amaka's voice trembled. "But I don't even know him." "You lost the right to choose," Adaku snapped. "He's doing you a favor." Amaka turned to her gently. "Miss Amaka, I won't hurt you. I know this isn't your wish. But life sometimes gives us strange beginnings." Something in his tone, calm, patient, almost fatherly, softened her fear. She nodded faintly. The wedding was quick. No church, no family, just signatures before a local official Adaku had bribed. As soon as the ink dried, Adaku handed Amaka a small envelope and said, "Take her away. Don't ever bring her back." The man nodded, helping Amaka into the car. Adaku stood at the gate, satisfied. "Let her rot in poverty," she muttered. "Good riddance." The road to Odenigbo, a small village outside Nsukka, was long and quiet. Rain had washed away half the red dust, leaving the air thick and humid. Neither spoke for nearly an hour. Finally, Amaka said, "I'm sorry for what she did to you. No woman deserves that." Amaka looked out the window. You don't even know me. I don't need to, he replied softly. Pain doesn't need an introduction. When they reached his home, a wooden hut with a tin roof, Amaka expected filth. Instead, she found order. A few old books stacked neatly, a clay pot bubbling with stew, and a single mattress covered in a clean wrapper. It's small, Amaka said, embarrassed. But it's safe. Amaka managed a faint smile. It's more than I expected. He poured her some hot tea made from lemongrass and sat silently as she drank. Outside, the frogs croaked like distant drums. Inside, for the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of peace. That night, Amaka lay awake, listening to the soft rain on the roof. She opened a small notebook, her last link to her late father, and wrote, I have nothing left but kindness from a stranger. Maybe that is enough to begin again. She didn't know that the man sleeping in the next room, quiet, humble Amaka, carried a truth that would one day shake Adeku's world and turn the shame she'd thrown into the soil of Amaka's victory. The next morning, sunlight cut through the holes in the tin roof like threads of gold weaving across the rough walls. Amaka woke up to the scent of fried yam and palm oil. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then the memories returned, the rain, the humiliation, her stepmother's cruel smile. Amaka was already outside, splitting firewood. His movements were strong but unhurried, the kind of strength that came from discipline, not pride. Good morning, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. You should eat before the market crowd starts. Nsukka people don't wait for latecomers. Amaka hesitated, surprised at his tone, kind, but firm, like someone used to giving instructions. She sat quietly, eating the yam in silence while Amaka fixed the broken hinge on the door. Her mind was restless. This man, he lives like a poor mechanic, but he doesn't move like one. By afternoon, she decided to go into town. The locals stared as she passed. The girl everyone said had been sold to a beggar. At the market, women whispered behind baskets of tomatoes. That's the one Adeku threw out, one said. Now she's married to that man who lives by the river, another added. Amaka held her head high, pretending not to hear. But inside, her heart burned with shame. When she returned, she found Amaka sitting outside reading a tattered newspaper. You read? She asked, surprised. He smiled faintly. But poor men shouldn't read. Amaka blushed. No, I didn't mean. It's fine, he interrupted gently. People see what they want to see. But truth doesn't shout, it waits. That night, Amaka couldn't sleep. Those words replayed in her mind. Truth doesn't shout, it waits. She didn't know it yet, but Amaka was waiting too, waiting for the right moment to reveal who he truly was. A week later, Mrs. Adeku arrived at their small hut unannounced, stepping out of a hired car with her designer handbag and disdain. So this is where you live now? She sneered, scanning the house as if the air itself was beneath her. Amaka's hands trembled. Mama, why are you here? Don't call me that. I came to make sure you're still alive. I don't need you dying and bringing curses to my name. Amaka stepped out quietly from behind the house, his face calm. Good afternoon, madam. Adeku looked him up and down. Still dirty, I see. Do you have any job, or are you living off my husband's property through that girl? Amaka's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Respect yourself, he said softly. Poverty isn't a crime, but pride can destroy even wealth. Adeku's eyes flashed. Watch your tongue, you worthless man. One day you'll beg me for crumbs. She turned to Amaka. When your child is born, don't ever come near my house. You made your bed, lie in it. Then she drove off, leaving a cloud of red dust and bitterness behind her. Amaka burst into tears. Why does she hate me so much? I never wronged her. Amaka placed a hand on her shoulder. Some people hate others for reminding them what they once were, poor, human, fragile. Don't waste your tears. Days turned into weeks. Amaka began to see the small kindnesses hidden in her new life. Amaka made sure she ate before he did. He built her a small chair so she could rest comfortably as her pregnancy grew. He fixed neighbors' generators and refused payment, only asking them to help keep the path clean. Slowly, people in Odenigbo stopped calling him the homeless man. They started calling him Brother Amaka. One evening, a trader brought a broken phone to repair. When he left, Amaka noticed Amaka opening the back carefully, using expensive-looking tools. "Where did you get these?" she asked. "A gift from my old life," he replied quietly. That night, when he thought she was asleep, she saw him counting bundles of crisp Naira notes and sealing them back into an old metal box beneath the bed. She pretended not to see, but her heart raced. Who exactly is this man I married? Meanwhile, Adeku's world began to crumble. The estate she'd fought so hard to control was under investigation. Her husband's former business partner had accused her of falsifying documents. Desperate to hide her crime, she visited the lawyer handling the late Mr. Obi's property. "You must sign the remaining papers quickly," she demanded. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "Madam, we can't proceed without your stepdaughter's signature." The property was partly willed to her. "That girl?" Adeku snapped. "She's dead to me." Be that as it may, the law says otherwise. For the first time, Adeku felt fear creep up her spine. Back in Odenigbo, the rainy season returned. One night, Amaka went into labor. Amaka rushed her to a nearby clinic in his old pickup truck. The nurses hesitated at first, recognizing the disgraced girl, but Amaka's calm authority silenced them. "Please," he said firmly, "treat her like you'd treat your sister." After hours of pain and prayer, a baby boy was born. Amaka wept as she held him, whispering, "You'll never know shame, my son. You'll know love." Amaka smiled, exhaustion softening his eyes. "His name should be Chidera, what God has written." 2 days later, he surprised Amaka with new clothes and a cab ride back to Nsukka. "We're visiting someone," he said mysteriously. They stopped in front of a tall building downtown. Marble floors, glass doors, men in suits moving briskly. Amaka frowned. "This can't be right. We don't belong here." Amaka smiled. "Trust me." Inside, the receptionist greeted him with sudden respect. "Good afternoon, sir. The board is waiting upstairs." Amaka froze. "Sir?" They stepped into an office larger than any room she'd ever seen. Photographs of companies and factories hung on the wall, with one name printed on each plaque, Dyke Holdings. Amaka turned to her, eyes full of calm pride. "I built this before I lost everything. I left to learn what money can't buy, humility. Now I'm back." Amaka's knees weakened. You're the owner?" "One of them," he said with a gentle smile. "The other half belonged to your father." She gasped, tears flooding her eyes. "Your stepmother thought I was a beggar," he continued, "but your father and I were friends. Before he died, he asked me to protect you if he couldn't. So when Adeku tried to sell you off, I made sure it was to me. Not to own you, but to save you." Amaka covered her mouth, trembling. "You knew all along?" "Yes," he said softly. "And now it's time for the truth to come out." Outside, thunder cracked in the distance again, just like the night she was thrown out. But this time, it didn't sound like sorrow. It sounded like justice, rolling through Nsukka like a drum announcing the dawn. For weeks after that shocking visit to the Dyke Holdings building, Amaka felt as if she were walking through a dream. Each morning she woke beside the man she once thought a beggar, and every time she looked at him, she saw something new, an ocean of calm where secrets used to hide. Amaka had returned quietly to Odenigbo, refusing to flaunt his wealth. "Money should serve people, not frighten them," he told her. Instead of moving into the company's mansion, he rebuilt their little hut into a sturdy brick home, paying the same carpenters who once laughed at him double their usual wage. The village women began visiting often, some to gossip, others to apologize. Mama Ifyinanya, who once called Amaka the cursed girl, now arrived with bowls of soup and pepper. "My daughter, forgive us. We didn't know who your husband was." Amaka smiled shyly. "We all learn, Mama. Let's just be kind next time." She had changed too. Her eyes no longer carried shame, they carried purpose. She helped organize literacy classes at the church, teaching market women how to read receipts so no trader could cheat them again. Amaka watched from the doorway each evening, baby Chidera in his arms, pride softening the lines of his face. "You're stronger than you think," he would whisper. No, she'd answer, smiling, we're stronger together. In Sukka, word spread fast. By the time Attiku heard that the beggar had turned out to be a wealthy man, her legs nearly gave way. She stormed into her friend's boutique, shaking. It's a lie. He deceived everyone. But inside she knew, she had been deceived only by her own arrogance. At night, she could barely sleep. The house that once felt like a throne now felt like a prison. The staff avoided her, whispering about karma. Her lawyer's call came 2 days later. Madam Attiku, the Board of Dyke Holdings requests your presence for a property hearing. The co-owner has returned. She gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. Co-owner, she repeated. Yes, madam. Mr. Amaka Dyke. The name echoed through her empty house like thunder. One afternoon, a convoy of black SUVs appeared at her gate. The neighbors peeped through curtains, whispering. Amaka stepped out first, simple shirt, clean shoes, calm smile. Beside him stood Amaka, dressed modestly but glowing with quiet confidence. Attiku came out trembling, unsure whether to curtsy or curse. Why are you here? She demanded. To settle what should have been settled long ago, Amaka said. He handed her an envelope. The documents you tried to forge, they're useless now. The property legally belongs to Amaka and her son. Attiku snatched the papers, scanning them with disbelief. You planned this, she hissed. No, Amaka replied gently. You planned your own downfall. Greed only digs the grave faster. Amaka said nothing. She looked at the woman who had humiliated her, pity replacing anger. Mama Attiku, she said softly, I forgive you, but I'll never forget how it felt to be thrown into the rain. Let that memory guide you to be better. For the first time in her life, Attiku had no words. The crowd that gathered outside murmured. In the eyes of the community, justice had arrived, not with noise, but with dignity. Weeks later, the church bells rang for a different reason. Father Okeke announced a Thanksgiving service for those who have seen God's mercy turn shame into glory. The pews were full. Traders, students, even the same elders who once judged Amaka filled the benches. When the choir sang, Amaka held baby Chitra high, tears streaming down her cheeks. Amaka stood beside her, humble as ever. After the service, Father Okeke took the microphone. Let this be a lesson, he said. The poor you despise today may be the hands that feed you tomorrow. Never judge by clothing or rumor. God's timing exposes every lie. The congregation shouted amen. And the drummers struck the final beat. Outside, children danced around the couple, chanting, Amaka the brave, Amaka the wise. Even the sky seemed brighter that day. That night, after the celebration ended and the village slept, Amaka and Amaka sat on the porch watching the stars. Do you ever wish things had been easier? She asked. He smiled. If they had, we might never have met. She laughed softly, resting her head on his shoulder. You know, I still remember the first day I saw you, dirty shirt, torn shoes. I thought my life was over. And I thought my peace was over, he teased. But it turns out both of us were wrong. A cool breeze swept through the compound, carrying the distant rhythm of drums. What will you do with all the wealth now? She asked. Use it, he said simply. Build schools. Fix roads. Help the children who sleep under bridges, like I once did. Amaka turned to him, astonished. You lived on the streets? For a year, he admitted. After a bad deal cost me everything. That's where I learned who real people are, the ones who share even when they have nothing. Amaka reached for his hand. Then maybe poverty was the disguise God gave you to find truth. He nodded slowly. And you were the proof that grace still lives among the broken. Back in Sukka, Attiku sold her jewelry to pay debts. Her pride melted with each passing day, but sometimes justice isn't about punishment, it's about realization. She began volunteering at an orphanage, silently trying to fill the emptiness inside. One evening, she sent a note to Amaka. You were right. Money without mercy is poverty of the soul. I pray you forgive me fully someday. Amaka read the letter quietly, then folded it beside her Bible. I already have, she whispered. The moon rose high that night over Odenigbo, silver light spilling across the rebuilt home. Amaka held Chidera in his arms, humming an old Igbo lullaby his mother used to sing. Amaka watched them, heart swelling with gratitude. Once, she had been the girl everyone mocked. Now, she was the woman others came to for strength. And the man once called homeless had become the heart of an entire community, proof that humility and kindness can build palaces where pride builds walls. The harmattan wind returned to Nsukka, dry and sharp, sweeping dust through every corner of the town. In Odenigbo, the chill carried a different weight, anticipation. Amaka had been summoned to appear before the High Court of Enugu State for a hearing about the late Chief Obi's estate. For Amaka, it felt like stepping into the lion's den again. Inside the courtroom, benches creaked under the weight of villagers, traders, and journalists. The same community that once whispered behind Amaka's back now came to witness her fate. The clerk called, Case number 422, Estate of Chief Obi. Adaku entered first, face powdered and proud, flanked by two lawyers. When she saw Amaka walk in with Amaka, simple dress, baby Chidera in her arms, her expression cracked for just a second. Justice Chukwuma adjusted his glasses. We are here to determine the rightful ownership of Chief Obi's holdings, including the family house and Dyke Holdings shares. Adaku's lawyer rose confidently. My lord, the so-called co-owner, Mr. Amaka Dyke, is nothing but an opportunist. My client insists the will was forged. Amaka stood slowly. With your permission, my lord. The judge nodded. Amaka opened a brown file and held up an old photograph, himself and Chief Obi shaking hands beside a newly built orphanage, dated 5 years earlier. Before his death, Chief Obi appointed me as trustee of a foundation we built together. He also left half his company to his daughter, Amaka, under my supervision until she turned 21. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Madame Adaku knew this, Amaka continued, but she hid the documents and forged new ones to seize full control. Here is her signature beside the fake company stamp. He handed the evidence to the clerk. Adaku's lawyer stammered, the crowd murmured. Justice Chukwuma called Adaku forward. Her hands trembled. Madam, do you deny this? Adaku's voice cracked. I only wanted to protect the property. She was a child. She got pregnant, she brought shame. The judge's gavel struck once. Shame is not a legal ground for theft, madam. Silence filled the room. Amaka stepped forward, tears brimming but voice steady. My father taught me that forgiveness frees the heart. I forgive her, my lord. But I ask that the property return to its rightful place, serving the people, not pride. The courtroom broke into applause before the bailiff called for order. Justice Chukwuma leaned forward. This court finds that Chief Obi's estate belongs equally to his daughter, Mrs. Amaka Dyke, and to the Dyke Foundation. Madam Adaku Obi is hereby stripped of administrative rights and fined for falsifying documents. Adaku covered her face, sobbing quietly. Her jewelry clattered against the floor, a sound like the fall of vanity itself. Amaka placed an arm around Amaka as the crowd rose to their feet. Outside, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. Madam Dyke, what lesson do you have for young women? One shouted. Amaka smiled through her tears. That a woman's worth is not measured by her mistakes, but by her strength to rise again. Days later, newspapers across Enugu carried the headline. Beggar-turned-billionaire wins case for orphan wife, stepmother convicted. In the markets, women told the story like a modern folktale. Taxi drivers quoted it to passengers. My brother, no look down on anybody. See wetin happened to Madam Adaku. Meanwhile, Amaka and Amaka quietly expanded the Obi Dyke Foundation, turning part of the company's profits into scholarships for orphans and single mothers. The same clinic where Amaka gave birth was renovated with new beds and electricity. One evening, Amaka asked to visit Adaku in her new, smaller home on the outskirts of town. The woman who once lived like royalty now sat on a wooden stool, peeling cassava. When Amaka arrived, Adaku froze. Why are you here? To bring food, Amaka said simply. And peace. Adaku's eyes filled. After all I did, you still? Because hate chained us both, Amaka whispered. I'm free now. I want you to be free too. Attica bowed her head. I don't deserve it. None of us do, Amaka said, handing her a parcel of rice and palm oil. But mercy isn't earned, it's given. For the first time, Attica wept without pride. A month later, Dyke Holdings hosted its annual board gala. Business leaders gathered in Lagos, unaware of the story behind their new chairwoman. When Amaka introduced Amaka to the stage, she hesitated, then spoke from her heart. A year ago, I had nowhere to sleep. Today, I stand here not because I am better than anyone, but because grace found me in the rain. If you ever see someone broken, remember, God hides kings in rags and queens in shame until the world is ready to listen. The hall erupted in applause. Even hardened CEOs wiped their eyes. Back in Nsukka, Attica listened to the speech on the radio. She placed her hand on her chest. Lord, thank you for using her light to expose my darkness, she whispered. She began attending church again, not to gossip, but to serve. Sometimes she visited the foundation's orphanage to sweep floors quietly. And though she never expected it, each time she saw Amaka, the younger woman greeted her with warmth. One cool evening, as dusk settled over Odenigbo, Amaka and Amaka sat outside their home watching little Chidra chase butterflies. The air smelled of roasted corn and peace. Do you ever miss the days we had nothing? Amaka asked playfully. Sometimes, Amaka said, because that's when I learned the difference between wealth and worth. She leaned against him. And what's the difference? Wealth buys a house, he said, but worth builds a home. They laughed softly. Somewhere in the distance, the church bells began to ring, echoing through the valley, a reminder that every storm eventually gives birth to light. The Harmattan haze lifted at last. The hills of Nsukka glowed gold again, and the roads that once carried shame now carried stories of renewal. For Amaka and Amaka Dyke, life had returned to stillness, but not silence. Every day brought visitors, students seeking scholarships, widows asking for work, pastors delivering blessings. The house that began as a hut had become a small sanctuary of hope. At the opening of the Chidra Memorial School, Amaka cut the ribbon as children in neatly pressed uniforms sang. Grateful hearts, joyful hands, thank you, Mama Amaka. She blinked back tears. Each brick of the school reminded her of the mud that once clung to her clothes when she was thrown out in the rain. Now that mud had become mortar. Later, reporters surrounded her. Madam Dyke, one asked, what inspired this? She smiled gently. Because someone once gave me shelter when I had none. The only way to honor grace is to pass it forward. Amaka stood nearby, pride hidden behind humility. He refused interviews, letting her light shine. Months later, Attica arrived quietly at the school gate. Her expensive wigs were gone, replaced by a simple scarf. In her hands she carried a bag of chalk and books. Amaka, noticing her from afar, approached slowly. You came, she said softly. Yes, Attica replied. Teach. Not for money, but to give back something good before my time ends. There was a long pause, then Amaka nodded. You're welcome here. That afternoon, the children laughed as Attica taught them multiplication under the mango tree. For the first time, her laughter was real, cleansed of pride. Years passed. Little Chidra grew into a curious boy with his father's calm eyes and his mother's spirit. One evening, as the family sat outside watching fireflies, he asked, Mama, why do people call you the woman of rain? Amaka smiled. Because, my son, the rain tried to drown me, but it washed me clean instead. He thought for a moment. So rain is not bad? No, my love, she whispered, rain only shows what soil can grow. Amaka squeezed her hand, and the night wrapped around them in gentle silence. A few years later, the governor invited Amaka to Enugu for an award ceremony recognizing women of courage. As she walked to the podium in a simple Ankara gown, flashes from cameras lit the hall. She began softly, voice trembling. I was once called worthless. Today I stand here not because I am better, but because I chose not to hate. Betrayal can wound the body, but forgiveness heals the soul. When society shuts its doors, open a window for others. Applause rose like a wave. Among the crowd sat Adiku, smiling through tears. After the event, Amaka returned to St. Matthew's Church, where everything had begun. She knelt before the altar, whispering, "Father, thank you. You turned my humiliation into testimony. You used my pain to teach compassion." Outside, children played on the same porch where she once stood shivering with a suitcase. She smiled and placed an envelope in the offering box. Inside it, a note read, "For the next girl who thinks the world has ended, tell her it has only just begun." The following year, Adiku fell ill. From her hospital bed she sent a message for Amaka and Amaka. When they arrived, she looked frail but peaceful. "I wronged you both," she whispered. "But God gave me time to see Mercy's face before I go." "Rest, Mama Adiku," Amaka said, holding her hand. "Your lesson lives in us." Adiku smiled faintly. "Then my soul is light." She passed that night, her final breath a quiet prayer of gratitude. At her burial, Amaka spoke simply. Pride built her walls, humility tore them down. May her story remind us that forgiveness is not weakness, it is victory. 10 years later, the Obi Dike Foundation had built 3 schools, a hospital wing, and hundreds of scholarships across southeastern Nigeria. Whenever people told the story, they never began with wealth. They began with the rain. Do you remember that girl Amaka, the orphan they called cursed? Ah yes. She married that man everyone mocked. Now look, she's saving lives. In market stalls, in buses, in schools, her name had become a proverb. No shame lasts forever if the heart stays clean. One quiet evening, standing on her balcony, Amaka watched a new storm rolling in. The first drops hit the tin roof softly. She closed her eyes and smiled. Her voiceover fades in, the kind used to close a YouTube drama documentary. Life will test your dignity. It will strip away your comfort and show you who truly stands beside you. Some storms come to destroy, but some come to reveal. Remember, the hands that lift others rise the highest. And the love you give in darkness becomes the light that guides your way. The rain intensified, glistening over the compound's lights. Inside, Amaka laughed as Chitara ran through the puddles, carefree and loud. Amaka turned toward them, heart full, whispering one last line. Justice doesn't always roar, it sometimes arrives as peace.